in terms of what this industry could be in the future, it lacks understanding that we all have a very personal relationship with this, whether that be or how it makes us feel or how it heals us. And without that understanding and without that community of us coming together on that, we lose a little bit of possibly what is America, right? Mm-hmm. That's what I'd say.
Okay. Anybody else want to? Oh, how are you?
I just popped up.
Sorry, she was a latecomer.
Yes, I'm a latecomer. I had a bit of a medical emergency with my baby this morning, so I'm a little behind schedule, so I apologize. But I am Sheena Roberson, and I am the founder of Cannabis Noir, and it is a platform dedicated to creating a more inclusive cannabis industry and community. So we are working diligently to get people registered, educated, trained, and give them opportunities within the cannabis space. To touch on Justin's point, I think that's absolutely true. I think it is. I'm sorry, Jordan. My son's name is Jordan. Sorry, should have gotten that right. To touch on that point, I think it is naive to not consider the possibilities when you create more inclusive and diverse spaces. I think inclusion and diversity offers such a opportunity within the business model itself. The generation of new ideas and new possibilities are just simply overlooked because of unfortunate stigma surrounding race, gender, income, social economic status, a variety of things. But I think the industry also, right now where it stands, sometimes misses the mark in terms of the branding and the marketing and the messaging to those untapped demographics. I think a lot of it is mismessaging. I think a lot of people assume that's not for me because the way it's presented to them. I think a lot of people who aren't registered, who aren't aware of the medicinal benefits, automatically cast aside some of the things they see in social media, some of the advertisements, some of the language. It's just not directed to them. So they automatically assume. I've talked to countless people who have come to registration events, and they're like, I didn't think I would even qualify. Like, well, what did you think the qualifications were? And they're like, I don't know, I just didn't think I qualified. And it's like, because none of it is marketed to them. It's not for them and doesn't resonate with them. So it's not penetrating into those communities that are most adversely impacted and need it the most. And it's not just the minority communities, it's the LGBT, it's the veterans, it makes a difference. And seniors, yes, it makes a really big difference in how you're marketing to people and the messaging you're using. And it does, I love that everybody is adamant about creating inclusive spaces, but those are the small things that we can actively do now to kind of help make sure that those things are moving along the way we would like to see them.
Right. So it's a good response. Because one of the things that you mentioned is, like, so there's opportunity, there's a marketing play that needs to happen, right? More culturally consistent or whatever marketing. So, but if you are a dispensary, and I'm going to go to Blythe and ask this question. If you are a dispensary, what is the opportunity for a dispensary to actually take some of what Sheena's saying and take what Chris is saying and put it in play? Like, what's the solutions to some of this?
I think there are several things that we can be doing. Engaging the community more, having more events like this, talking to people and just having very open, honest dialogue about cannabis, about the industry, about the opportunities in the industry, about all of the additional opportunities that are in the pipeline for the industry. I think that's one way. Obviously, hiring is another really big opportunity to have an impact within a dispensary itself.
So, Erica, question for you. So, what does hiring look like for you, for your organization?
Well, obviously, it's based on their skills, but we really look for people that are going to connect with our patients. Speaking to both Blythe and Sheena's, we're creating a safe place for our patients, and I think that a lot of these communities that are not represented as well, they don't feel safe because they've been adversely targeted. So you really have to strive for safety in these areas, you know, letting them know that it is okay for you, it is an opportunity for you, and that you are not, you know, we're trying our best to move away from that adversity.
Right. Yeah, that piece you bring up too, like I think the senator, I think he may have left by now, but and even Jason's comments and several, like we can't as a sector, or as a field or an industry, like ignore the history that literally 5 years ago, the same dudes who, you know, couldn't open a dispensary legally, right, are now in a space where you are, right? Or I'm sorry, you're in a space where they once were in some way. So there's an inherent structural issue with the field, if you will, or the laws around the field. So the question then, Angelo, as a dispensary, as a kind of a business person on this side, what's some strategies you might have, or ways you can think of, like, I don't know if I'm righting the ship, or if there's some way in which, you know, the industry can respond to the historical injustice. Not saying you personally did anything to do it, but how does it, you know, what are some ways we can do something different?
Right, so I think it's all about, you know, perception is reality out there. You know, the perception of everything now is, as everyone on the panel said, is one way. And it's all about, you know, changing that thought process. And, you know, working for a grower processor, you know, one of 7 or 8 I think we have in the state now, I think it's important that it works from a top-down level. Not that we're any important than any other business in the state, but just to kind of create that awareness that this industry needs to be all-inclusive is really important. So, I mean, specifically things that I would do. I mean, I'm the low man in the totem pole at Cresco Ultra, so for me to... Right, I think I'm in that. Thanks, Jason. You know, if I was to make a suggestion, and you know, I grew up in Northeast Philadelphia, and, you know, I didn't look like all the other friends I went to school with. You know, even though my skin isn't that dark, I still got, you know, bullied, being called, you know, coffee eyes, and, you know, why are you different than some of us? Yeah, that was actually a tease. So, you know, I don't pretend to know the struggle ultimately, but I do understand that, you know, for this to really work out well from a successful standpoint, everyone needs to be inclusive. And, right. You know, I think a lot of that has to do with hiring.
Right, all right. So, Chris, like you were going to say something, you just took a breath. I'm watching you, Chris.
No, you know, one of the things that we need to be doing is being in the communicating and educating. We all agree on that. But everybody needs to come out of their comfort level. And no offense, but we're sitting in Media, Pennsylvania. I mean, honestly, I try to be in Germantown. I try to be in North Philly. Like, we need to set the example and go into communities. I, for one, had one of the craziest experiences going into Mount Airy. And I made a lot of mistakes. And I can look back and reflect on that. But the lesson I learned was that there are cultural issues, and there are neighborhoods where they have just been so disadvantaged in our law enforcement and our legal system. African American men are 5 times more likely to be arrested for a small marijuana crime than any white people. So you look at these communities, they were selling joints, a joint, a dime bag, and now have a record. I can't hire them. So I'm looking for diversity, and that's not just African Americans, but there's a much higher portion of that population that has been, I have no words to talk about what's going on, but I can't hire them. And also in those communities, especially when you live in the city and you have an older population, this is what happened to me, is all they know is that their kids are getting locked up. All they see are drug deals on the street. When they hear that a white drug dealer is coming into town, who they assume is privileged and rich, they don't want us there. And I don't blame them. So we now have a responsibility to go into communities that are less familiar with this plan and try to educate them on the plan. The other thing we need to do is get these records expunged and, you know, move on.
Yes.
And these are the people we should be hiring.
Yes. Yes.
So it's a good point here, right? And thanks for the applause. Chris was baiting you off of that. What's the partnerships look like, Jordan? Because if the industry is going to actually participate in some of this policy work that needs to happen on sponge, whatever, what's its role? Like, how do you think it's going to work? And this is going to be a question for everybody. I'm going to start with Jordan, and we're going to try to get some solutions out on the table, because all your cousins think you have a role, right? And now it's just like, well, what is that role? And then how do you actually do it?
Absolutely. I'd say the partnership looks more like this, right? Like us showing up in say the Kensingtons, the Mount Airies, right? Honestly, it's more like coming up with these type of events, these standalone events from these companies that we don't often see made by people like you and within your communities, right? The partnership on our side of things is sending out the people that we hire who are passionate, who are in tune with the culture, and getting them involved with you, getting into, you know, your face, because that's the best way that the communication is going to happen. We need to figure out exactly what it is that we as a larger company can do outside of just bringing more people into our company, right? Like education, events, more senior outreach. We've been talking on helping parents with autism, right? There's a huge gap there. Even bringing different, advocating for different kinds of medicines that are not available here in the state yet, but they're available elsewhere. That's what the partnership looks like, right? Having that conversation, what do you want? What do you need? How can we make that work?
So the field can move past the mic. So one thing I caught from that was that the field can leverage its resources for advocacy for communities that essentially have been marginalized or disenfranchised over time, right? So just remember that, cousins. There's an advocacy role you play. Okay.
I think that on a corporate level, we should be sponsoring legislators with common sense reform in mind. Those that are pushing for expungement and you know, reforming the medical marijuana, recreational or adult use marijuana, we should be at the higher level supporting those people. And then also on a lower level, just ensuring that we are you know, keeping those goals in mind, not just putting dollars behind it, but actually practicing what we preach.
Yeah, that's a good one, because like lobbying is real, right? Like in any other country around the world, some I've traveled, we call that bribery, but in the U.S. we call it lobbying. So let's just use what we got. You know what I mean? What do you got, Bob?
I agree. I think it really is just getting out and talking to the communities, doing more of these events, really understanding that there are opportunities and there are positions that we're looking to fill. To me, it's about having the communication and really having an outlet to have these types of conversations. And I think too, we all at this table can agree it's something that we can do as an industry together to keep each other, you know, open and increasing conversations amongst the industry itself about different efforts we're taking, because somebody might explore an avenue that's been extremely successful for them, and if we're talking about it and we're talking about what we're utilizing to, you know, meet these particular members or have successful hiring events, we can all learn from it.
Sheena, you have anything that will open up to our cousins in the audience in the comfortable seats?
Okay. Everybody pretty much nailed it. I think a big part of it is definitely the support of the criminal justice reform at a level that just surpasses what some advocates are in the space are doing in the green root space. But I also think that while I agree that we need to make sure that we're going into these spaces like the Kensingtons and the North Phillies and the West Phillies, and we're having these expungement clinics, we're having these conversations, we're having these opportunities be presented, we have to make sure that we're being sensitive of how we're doing it. And the approach we take when we do it, I think we may miss the mark and the opportunity to connect with a lot more of the demographic of the population when we don't incorporate or we don't reach out in the right way. And I think people may be off-put or scared or not familiar enough, but that's why it's important. I always encourage, I've had the pleasure of working with all of the dispensaries represented here in one way, shape, or another, and they've all been very supportive of working with the church and having events at St. Matthew's Greater Baptist Church and having a registration event there versus the senator's office, because you're not as apprehensive. It mitigates the tension. You're not, the pastor's there. You feel comfortable. Our English as a second language community who doesn't want to bring any of their documentation with them now feels like this is a safe haven. If nothing else, I know that I'm safe here. I think reaching out to those community leaders, those liaisons, and connecting with them so that you can reprise the approach and make sure that you're optimizing every chance you get to connect with the community is important. Because, if you just come in and throw up a flyer and it's not in the right space, it's not where people go, it's not something that people would recognize as opportunity, then we miss the opportunity to connect with a whole group of people who desperately need us. Maybe more so than any other demographic. So I think that while those things are important, it's also important to incorporate the community and kind of find effective ways to penetrate through to those spaces that don't often get touched on.
And speaking of including the community, I'm going to just bounce the same question out to everybody. I just had a mental image, right? So remember in the 80s, 90s, there was the big HIV public health push, right? Remember that? And there was and several churches still have flyers where the pastor would be on the flyer and said, "I just got tested for HIV." Can you imagine Pastor Jones with a spliff saying, I feel better about myself now? So, it can happen. I can actually see that level of engagement where people are more honest about, the use of the medicinal plant for their health. Right? So I think that kind of real communication and dialogue in communities that the industry can participate in could also be a strategy. So let's go out and see any strategies you all have. How might we, if the challenge is to get more people engaged and be more inclusive in the sector or the field, how might we do that? Sir, Mike.
Well, my big thing is vote.
What's that?
Vote.
Votes.
There we go, vote.
Right.
All the kids, register and vote. It's your future.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. Anybody else? Yes.
So I don't necessarily have a comment. It might be more of a question.
The question's good.
I fully recognize my privilege that I have, as I am so fortunate that I am a sick person who got sick, who is financially secure enough that I can go pay cash for the medication that will help me. But I am very aware that the people who need this the most can't. This is not accessible to them. They can't go spend $300 to get certified by a doctor.
Because they've got a
They
fixed
can.
income.
When I look at how much money I'm spending on my medication, if I was not, just by the stroke of luck that I met the person I met in college and married him and we ended up where we are, I could not afford to get the relief that I can get. What can I do from my, place of privilege to impact the people who are unable to access this medication? I'll gladly go down to Kensington and talk to someone. I will gladly go into any community and to any situation, talk to people to see what I can do to help. I want to help. Although I'm fortunate enough to live the life that I live, I'm married to an African American man. My children are biracial. I have a 21-year-old son that I have to have very different conversations about just life in general than all of my peers have with their white children. So I want to know, I do have a social conscience. What can I do to help you guys get into these communities? I guess that's really my question. How can I help?
So how do you all use your patients now? How do you use them for your advocacy? And I think a deeper question is, we all sit in a real privileged space, right? So how is it that we actually leverage our privilege for underprivileged? That's part 2 of the question.
Yeah, that's part 2.
Go to part 1. Go to
Part 1.
Come on, Chris, we'll watch you. Stay with us.
Yeah, so we have a lot of patients that are interested in getting involved. I always talk cannabis time and real time, and it's been cannabis time for the last, so I think we're all playing catch up and trying to just put initiatives into place that we'd like to. I had a question to the Department of Health, which has gone unanswered, but that's a different story, about patients getting involved with us and whether or not if we have you doing advocacy for us in events, if you need to become part of the medical marijuana organization. So that's one of the things that I was looking into, because we actually have a list of patients that want to get involved. So I can only speak for myself, but if we have patients that we can legally have involved one way or the other, we're right now building an education center. We would love to have patients come and speak. We would love to do events where, fortunately a lot of us are patients, but it's always every perspective we can bring into a community is better. So that's something that I would love to do. I'd be happy to take your name and see what we can do.
Great.
I think another opportunity is to become a caregiver and to find those patients who need the help, even if it's just going and delivering meds to them. It's a fantastic opportunity to help those patients who have no way to get to a dispensary or physically can't get to a dispensary. That's one way. And I think it's an opportunity too where hopefully we can start increasing the caregiver numbers that we have. Any patients that we see who are also interested in becoming caregivers, there's definitely an opportunity there.
So let me ask you a question. In short of having kind of insurance plans for medical marijuana, right? Do you all subsidize folks, like a certain number of people? Is there like a underprivileged patient care card or something you can do? How does that work?
I know that some dispensaries do have those programs in place. Other opportunities are for seniors and veterans. I know our company has a collection that we do charity jars. So we, instead of like any type of tip or anything like that at our facilities, we've got jars where patients can contribute. We typically have those designated to a charity within the community. But something else we've done is collect that money that we will then use for our existing patients that we know are having trouble paying for their meds. So while it's not a huge reach, it does reach some of our patients, and it's one of the ways that we can give back.
So I just wanted to quickly address what you said. I think that, being a part of the solution is all hands on deck. The more, the merrier, the better. We do education groups and programming. We do, senior van rides from the church to dispensaries. We need drivers. We need people to help out for those things. That's great. We always need those extra hands, but you are in a unique position to be especially effective because you are able to be in a room with people who will listen to you that just won't listen to me. Because I don't look like you.
Right.
So if you can have those conversations on my behalf and introduce those opportunities to say, wait, listen, I actually know that's not what it is. And when they're not hearing it from me and they're hearing it from you, someone that looks like them, that lives like them, that lives among them, their kids play together, you go to the same, that makes a difference. When you can use your privilege to talk to other people in privilege and explain and that to folks who don't understand and don't see it, that is just as helpful as being there hands on deck.
Okay.
It's not more.
That's a really important part. So for all of the how do you say this, non-people of color in the room.
Call it what it is.
I would say this whole notion of leveraging yourselves in advocacy of causes, which many of you probably do in certain ways, you know, whether it's church groups or whatever, is really a critical thing Sheena brings up. Because I remember about 10 years ago, I'd said I was not going to teach multicultural counseling anymore. Like, I was just not going to do it. Because I wasn't actually the right person to be teaching it to some extent, even as much knowledge I had about it. But, you know, I was teaching in predominantly white schools, and they kind of expected me to say, don't be the devil. You know what I mean? Like, they expected that to come out of my mouth, right? But what they didn't, what I thought was more palatable and more useful is when someone from their community were able to talk about, like, some of these very issues that impact, like, how the nation runs, as we see, right? So I would implore that our cousins figure out, and I would say don't go it alone, right? Like, there's resources in the industry, and maybe part of what we could talk about is how do you get resources, educational resources, out to the public so they can use in these various communities that they sit in? Is it something that's organized, is it ad hoc? How does that work? And then for the audience, like, how might they get you information is a really important question. So you can be like the best advocate you can be to leverage your privilege.
I just have something to say about the cost. I'm a New Jersey patient, and the dispensaries in New Jersey offer various discount levels. So I get Social Security disability. I get a 20% discount at the dispensary that I go to. They offer it also for veterans and other things. Do you guys do that here?
Well, who does, so we can know.
So we weren't allowed to give any discounts as of August of this year. The DOH made the announcement the day flower rolled out, which was, I received the email while I had 50 people waiting out of my door who had been there for 8 hours and thought, this is not the time to throw this at us. The reality in this industry is that we are taxed at a really, really high rate. I did not do a business plan that included discounts because it was against the law to do. When you run the numbers, and for anybody who's a small business, I can't speak about the big ones, I don't have any money. I borrowed everything. I am millions and millions of dollars in debt. When I run the numbers, I was able to give a veterans discount, which still makes it, I'll still be losing money. But if I gave a discount to everyone who walks in my door, and this is an answer anybody's gonna like, is low income on Social Security, a veteran, or mostly senior citizen, because my average patient's 60 years old. I would close in a year if I started giving out all those discounts at this stage. What we're trying to do is work with our growers to bring down their prices so that we can all kind of roll down together. The problem with that is in Colorado, when the bottom fell out there and they all raced to the bottom, I don't know what percentage are still open from the beginning. But this is a business for us, honestly. So what we need to do is get rid of the taxes that we're under, get money back to our investors, and this is a whole different ballgame. We can lower the prices. The state is supposed to have a subsidy program, but it won't go into effect until they pay off their debt and get tax revenue, and no one's paid any taxes yet. So that's my horrible story, is that I'm not doing it now because I want to be here later.
Wow.
Can you overcharge like white college kids?
I would come off it. They would make up about 0.0001%. Right.
Just a thought.
But yeah, no, it's a horrible thing. When we couldn't give out veterans discounts, listen, I was screaming from the hills, and the next thing you know, noon on August 1st, people were giving out dollar grants, and I thought, like, is everybody going to go out of business?
So I'd just like to add, I think what assists that is not all this is a cash business right now, right? So we really want to start lobbying our health insurance providers. I know New Jersey patients have had precedents now. There's at least one or two different cases that have been tried, and for the patient to be reimbursed if they qualify in their state's medical cause to be a medical cannabis patient, there should be no reason why your insurance company wouldn't then pay for that form of medicine. especially with this opioid conversation we're having, we as patients and as users of those insurance companies have to lobby that now in their hands. Listen, you're going to subsidize my opiate dependency, but you're not going to subsidize healthy answers for our community. That's silly. We'll look for insurance companies that do provide that. So I want to remember in your state, whether it's New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, to push on your insurance lobby and talk to your own insurance providers as to what the next step is in getting your meds covered for you. Because I think that alleviates a lot of that financial concern. What a lot of people don't understand that dispensary owners have to face is they can't write off any cost of service. Right. So that as a small business owner, they get no chance to write off any of their cost. Manufacturers do. Doctors have their own situation, but dispensary owners have a very high burden of cost. So we see them, because they're our interaction, we see them as our window to function. And there are some dispensaries and owners in this state that are doing amazing jobs, and we want to highlight those people for what they're doing and continue to hold that up and move forward. But I just think the conversation is with the insurance company as far as alleviating some of that financial stress.
So one thing Chris actually brought up I thought was important in terms of this kind of exchange of information is that there is the reality that this is a business, right? And for what we hear in the public, it's a billion-dollar industry. Everybody's making money, right? Like it's, woo, just get a plant, you good, right? If you got marijuana somewhere near you, you like, woo, like this is straight gold, you know, like it's just nuts, right? How the image of this is. You hear radio placement, get into this $1 billion. John Boehner is going to be there telling you about how to get into this investing thing, right? You hear all this stuff under, so there's this impression that the industry is like cash loaded, right? Most people don't know the federal laws, can't tell you about, you know, all this other stuff, any of this stuff, right? So how is part of your mission or your conversation, the education piece, Angelo, how are you talking about like the business side of it, right? So people know that we ain't really as rich as John Boehner wants us to think we are.
Right, yeah, so you know, like I mentioned earlier, from a grower standpoint, I'm the low man in the totem pole. Our company was founded in Illinois. It's a completely different state, different guidelines. And then they entered into Pennsylvania and some other states. But I mean, what I try to do as an individual is come to events like this on a Sunday afternoon in media, morning, all day, on a rainy day. And see patients and have discussions at that table that, you know, honestly make me want to, you know, cry, because that's really why I got in this industry. I come from the pharmaceutical world. I work for big companies, so I'm no stranger to, you know, being out there doing all the work, and believe me, don't take this as, you know, woe is me. You know, I did make some pretty good money, but I just didn't get the that sense of value anymore, because it was out there pushing products that insurance companies didn't want to pay for. But now I'm really having like conversations with patients that, you know, explain to me like this product's really saving my life. Mm-hmm. So for me personally, I like to be involved in any kind of event, discussions like that, and that's how I see myself personally contributing to.
Blythe, how about you? How are you educating people in your dispensary or in the space, the public, about the business side of it, right? Because there's a lot of, you know, false images about what this sector really is.
Yeah.
At least financially, anyway.
I guess that's a tough question for me to answer. Honestly, it's events like this and panels like this where we can start having, I don't think those questions are commonly posed to me by our patients. So I don't really have an opportunity to have those conversations.
Right.
But while I have the mic, I think it's an opportunity that we all know as an industry collectively, we can work together. There's strength in numbers to try and make some changes within the laws to give us maybe a little relief and opportunity to pass some savings along.
Okay. So here's a skip. How much time we have? Not much, right?
Yeah, ship out in 20 or 30 minutes.
Oh, more? Oh, okay. All right, my bad.
That's a lot of time.
All right, let me rephrase that. So here's 8 more questions. So tell me about this. If you were to dream, no, that's my last question. Let's leave that. So tell me more about this idea of, we talked about patience, right? I think Angela just brought up this whole idea of patience, right? So in our patient community, we have diversity, right? In our hiring, we don't. Why is it important? Why is it important to have diversity, period? Okay. Actually, Jordan needs the mic.
So, well, herbology also got its start out of Illinois, okay? And we do work on discounts on an individual basis, but herbology is a company that is multi-state, all right? It's very large, and in the way that we work with patients, like, I would love to sit up here and pretend like I'm making a lot of money, but I'm not. I'm 30, okay? There's still a lot of years ahead of me. But what we do for the patients is very much on an individual basis, and we try I like to see myself as that voice in the room, because I don't come from a place of privilege for the people that I work for, and I expect to kind of be that borderline between the culture and the business. And I think when the patient gets there, that it is important for them to see the culture in the room. And for us, since we are across several states, what you might find here is not the entire story, okay? We have a very diverse group that works in the grow, works in the dispensary. Maybe they're not here, maybe they're in Chicago, maybe they're in Iowa. But the diversity is there, and we're very much working on making it more apparent. I know number one thing is I'm looking for more women to get involved at our Passionate location. And that is something that I take on myself. I don't wait for anybody to tell me that. I recognize the need, and I go out there and I look for it. Okay. And that's how I try to contribute to this industry and to our company, because it is so large.
So I would just challenge that we have diversity of patients versus diversity of employees, because I don't think there is as much diversity in our patient population as there should be. I would actually say I probably have a higher percentage of diversity in my staff than I do in my patients. Okay. I still have enough diversity that I don't feel that I'm diverse enough. I want my patients to walk through the door and feel represented, and and that's for me, and I say it over and over, that's not just minority, but it's age. So we don't have a lot of age in this industry either, which is quite challenging, and I won't pick on millennials, but it's challenging. And our patients are over 60 years old, so that's diversity too. They don't necessarily want to walk into the same young kids all the time. They're going to look just like we all do and look for someone in our community. That's a community, and they want to come in and feel represented by age as well and feel comfortable. But I think we need to do all of this outreach is in these communities. It's not just for staff, it's also for patient education.
All right, sorry, very good. Eric, you got something to say?
Yeah, so the question was, why is it important to promote diversity both in patient and in dispensaries in our hiring? Well, to build on what Chris was saying earlier about how a black man is 5 times more likely to get arrested for the use of cannabis or possession of cannabis, the rest of that is despite equal use. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's really important, that we are all using it just as frequently. Right. It's just that this group is getting penalized more often. Right. So there's that. And then
it's over policing, not over consumption.
Exactly, exactly. It's the stigma. It's
and
that
hyper
image.
surveillance too.
Exactly.
Hyper surveillance.
Yeah. If I was walking down the street with a black man and he was smoking, I was smoking, I guarantee you he's going to get in trouble before I would. Yeah. And I think that that's something that needs to be changed. And then the other question that was asked that I really wanted to highlight is, despite the fact that dispensaries in Pennsylvania are unable to do as much as they want to do, there's companies like Terra Vita that are giving back to the community in other ways. I can't tell you how many times I've seen using them out in the community, feeding the community, volunteering. I mean, those are ways that we are equalizing as well. So we didn't mention it, so I wanted to. Another way is Candy Care specifically. Last year, or actually in 12 days of November, we are trying our best to mitigate the cost by doing things like free veteran certification. So for 12 days in November, all 27 of our offices certified veterans for no cost at all. So that's $200 completely waived, allowing them to use that money at a dispensary on their medicine. The company-wide, we did over 7,000 veterans for free. We also work with community partners. We allow nonprofit organizations a certain amount of free money or evaluations at our offices to help ease that burden. And although we do have to pay, or we're not, we have some type of 280E, or so, like, we're not able to write everything off either because Canna, Care, Docs, and it's obvious what we do. So we don't have as many tax write-offs as well. We do try to do that as best as we can.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I just, again, we have an opportunity with a multitude of dispensary owners up here to acknowledge the regional demographic as well, right? Like, we may not